So the Battle of the Wall is over. Mance Rayder is captured and Stannis is settled into the wall. But Jon knows that even though the fight with the wildlings is over, the real battle is still yet to come. In King's Landing, Joffrey and Tywin are both dead, leaving Tommen on the Iron Throne and Cersei finally in a position of power. While across the Narrow Sea, Daenerys finds that conquering a city is far easier than ruling it. Arya and Tyrion have also managed to find their way across the Narrow Sea after the events of last season, while Sansa has found a newfound strength with Littlefinger, or so she thinks. So after the massive events of last season, what could David and DB possibly do to up the ante this season? Let's find out. This is Season 5. So this season is an interesting beast, because it's the season that contains some of the show's highest highs as well as some of its lowest lows. You had a lot moving forward, an impressive feat considering the game-changing events of the last season, but unfortunately you also had a couple steps back as well for our characters. In terms of adapting material with the books, this was the season where David and DB finally started to go at their own pace and draw bits and pieces from each of the latter 3 books, because while a majority of the material this season draws from A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, which the book heads will know go together chronologically, there are still 1 or 2 storylines from book 3 that need to get wrapped up as well. So this season kicks off with something we've never actually seen kick off a season of the show before. A flashback. More specifically, a flashback that book readers knew about but never had actually read. And I'm talking about an event from the childhood of Cersei Lannister in which she as a little girl, along with a friend of hers, found a witch in the woods named Maggie the Frog and forced her to give them a prophecy about her. A prophecy that has haunted her ever since, which echoes as such: that Cersei would become a queen, have 3 children but not with the king, and lose all 3 of them before being murdered by her brother. And those words have haunted her ever since. We then cut back to King's Landing, where Tywin is now dead, having been murdered by Tyrion, and Joffrey's death has left Joffrey's younger brother and Cersei's youngest, Tommen, on the Iron Throne. But the real power here is Cersei, of course, because for the first time in a very long time, she actually has a position of real influence, as she is now her son's #1 advisor with Tywin out of the picture. And since Tommen is a lot more complacent and, slightly less psychotic than Joffrey, he will follow orders much more easily. Now, unfortunately, just because she's in a position of power does not mean that she makes all the right decisions. No. First of all, she's still extremely jealous of Marjorie, and has been ever since Marjorie was first announced to marry Joffrey. And now that Joffrey's dead, Marjorie has married Tommen in order to remain the queen, and she's been putting ideas into Tommen's gullible little mind in order to undermine Cersei at every turn. In order to stop Marjorie and her influence over Tommen, Cersei comes up with a not really that brilliant idea. Ever since Tywin's death, a group of religious fanatics known as the Sparrows have come to King's Landing in order to punish all of those that they see as unclean in the eyes of the Seven. They are led by the High Sparrow, played by veteran actor Jonathan Pryce. Cersei decides to raise him to a massive position of power by making him the new High Septon, the religious head, and the Sparrows immediately get to work cleansing the city of all of their perceived sinners, including the original High Septon who's caught in a brothel, as well as Marjorie's brother Loras Tyrell due to his homosexuality. Marjorie attempts to have Tommen interfere on her brother's behalf, but Tommen proves next to useless, and the Faith arrests Marjorie for helping to conceal her brother's homosexuality. Cersei believes that her plan is working perfectly, but as usual, her perfect plan completely backfires in her face, as her cousin Lancel, the same cousin who helped her murder Robert Baratheon, has now joined the Sparrows, and tells the Sparrow about Cersei's conspiracy to murder Robert, as well as Cersei's relationship with both Jaime and Lancel, whom she slept with during Jaime's absence. Cersei is then locked up in the Sept, and tortured every day by Septa Unella, who holds out water in front of her and tells her to confess. In the end, in order to get back to the Red Keep and to Tommen, Cersei confesses her crimes, and the Sparrow decides that her punishment will be a walk of penance, forcing her to walk from the Sept all the way to the Red Keep stark-ass nude, having to do with the hazing crowd and rotting vegetables being thrown at her the entire way. When she finally gets back, she is all but defeated, her bid for power having completely blown up in her face, except for one trump card, a zombified Gregor Clegane, who despite dying due to the poison that infected his system during his fight with Oberyn Martell, he has successfully been brought back to life thanks to Qyburn, the maester who Roose Bolton sent with Jaime to King's Landing. Now, you might all be wondering, where the hell is Jaime during all of this? Well, he is unfortunately suffering through easily the worst storyline that has ever been set upon in the world of Game of Thrones, and that would be the infamous Dorne storyline. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you guys remember way back in Season 2, Tyrion sent Myrcella to Dorne in order to both protect her from Stannis' assault and to forge a new alliance with Dorne by having her marry Trystane Martell, the son of Doran Martell, ruler of Dorne and brother of Oberyn, who, if you guys remember, was the guy who got his skull crushed by the mountain last season. After Oberyn's death, his paramour Ellaria returns to Dorne and urges Doran, her brother-in-law, to take revenge on the Lannisters for Oberyn's death, and by extension Elia's, as Oberyn was in King's Landing to avenge her, by killing Myrcella. When Doran refuses in order to keep the peace, Ellaria rallies all three of Oberyn's bastard daughters, known collectively as the Sand Snakes, in order to capture Myrcella and kill her to avenge Oberyn. And this is where the show really falters, because the Sand Snakes are terrible, horrifically acted, terribly written, really dull, and rather uninteresting characters, and it's made worse by the fact that Oberyn was such a great character. Not to mention the fact that this so drastically changes the storyline from the novel, which was so much better, because in the novel, the spearhead of this little campaign to get Myrcella was Prince Doran's oldest daughter, Arianne, who does not exist in the show, and her attempt was to gain power by crowning Myrcella as the queen of King's Landing, because by Dornish law, the eldest child gets the crown regardless of gender. So they were going to try and crown her in order to create some opposition from Tom and create some actual, tension with the Lannisters without actually, straight up killing her and throwing the kingdoms into complete chaos. So Ellaria stupidly sends Cersei a necklace she gave Myrcella wrapped up in the jaws of an ornate viper, causing Cersei to do what any mother would do and send Jaime to Dorne in order to rescue her and bring her home. Jaime recruits Bronn, rescuing him from the boring predicament Cersei set him up with in order to stop him from representing Tyrion in his trial by combat, and the two set off, smuggling themselves into Dorne disguised as merchants. They successfully manage to make it to Sunspear, the capital of Dorne, and find Myrcella, but they're attacked by the Sand Snakes in easily the most horrifically choreographed fights in Game of Thrones history. However, before anyone could die, everyone is arrested and imprisoned by Dornish soldiers led by Prince Doran's bodyguard, Adeo Hota. Afterwards, Doran negotiates a peace between Ellaria and Jaime, and agrees to send Myrcella back to King's Landing with Jaime, as well as Trystane, who would replace Oberyn as Doran's representative on the small council. Unfortunately, Ellaria gets the last laugh by poisoning Myrcella when she kisses her goodbye, using the same poison that Oberyn, the Sand Snakes, and all the Dornish soldiers use on their weapons, a poison that one of the snakes in Nymeria demonstrated on Bronn when they were imprisoned. Without the antidote, Myrcella dies in Jaime's arms on the ship, right as he admits to her that he's her father, in a particularly touching moment, continuing Cersei's prophecy that all of her children will die. Across the Narrow Sea, we catch up with everyone's favorite dwarf and the last of the Lannister siblings, Tyrion. After murdering his father and being forced to flee the capital, Tyrion has spent the better part of the last month in a crate on a ship going to parts unknown. He is finally let out by Varys when they reach Pentos, and Tyrion finds himself in the home of an old character, Illyrio Mopatis, the Magister who helped sell Daenerys to Khal Drogo. Varys reveals to Tyrion that he's been secretly in league with Illyrio to help bring Daenerys back to power in Westeros ever since the fall of the Targaryens at the end of Robert's Rebellion, and now he wants Tyrion to come and help guide her in her eventual conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. Which brings us over to the newly crowned Queen of Meereen, the mother of dragons herself, Daenerys, who has discovered that, surprise, surprise, conquering and ruling a city are two completely different things, and ruling is not nearly as easy as it looks. For starters, her followers are under attack by a rebel group called the Sons of the Harpy, who are slaughtering both her Unsullied and her Second Son soldiers all across the city. Daenerys does manage to capture one, however the leader of the slaves in Meereen, who has gained a seat on her council, has the son executed. In order to show that everything is just in Meereen, Daenerys makes the same dumbass mistake that Robb made all the way back in Season 3 with Rickard Karstark and executes the slave, alienating the support of the freed Meereenese. This, of course, does nothing to stop the attacks which continue to recur throughout the city, and Grey Worm's Unsullied troop is lured into an ambush. Sir Barristan comes to their aid and attempts to help them, killing a ton of sons in the process, but the sons' numbers prove to be too great, causing Grey Worm to be seriously injured and killing Sir Barristan. In response to this, Dany brings all of the former masters of Meereen into the crypts where her dragons are, and the dragons roast one of the slave masters alive in order to show her off her power. Then, in order to try and ease some of the tensions that she caused, she decides to marry one of the former masters, his daughter Zolorak, in order to bring some peace to Meereen, and gives in to his idea to reopen Meereen's fighting pits, which is closed since she took the city. Meanwhile, Tyrion and Varys stop in the free city of Lys on their way to Daenerys, where Tyrion is captured by Jorah Mormont, who attempts to bring Tyrion to Daenerys on his own in order to get back into her favor. On the way there, they pass through the ruin of Old Valyria, the Targaryens' ancestral home, and Tyrion is distracted by Drogon flying overhead, allowing the two of them to be attacked by stone men who have been completely afflicted with grayscale and driven mad. The two do manage to fight them off, but Jorah is later revealed to have been touched by one of them, afflicting him with grayscale, which means he will eventually become like the stone men. The two of them are then captured by slavers and sold to one of the fighting masters of Meereen, where they get a chance to show off their fighting skills for a chance to fight in the massive main fighting pit in Meereen. But unbeknownst to them, Daenerys herself has showed up to the demo fight and sees Jorah, and almost has him killed on the spot, but not before he presents Tyrion to her, finally bringing together two of the biggest characters on the show. Tyrion convinces her to let him counsel her, first advising her to banish Jorah due to the fact that he is still loyal to her despite betraying her, but it would send a bad message if she executes men who idolize her. Jorah, however, still determined to get back into her favor no matter the cost, manages to convince the fighting masters to let him fight in the main arena. This turns out to be a lucky move, however, because after he wins the main fight in front of Daenerys, he ends up throwing a spear into a son of the Harpy that was attempting to kill her from behind. A massive group of the Sons then emerge from the stands and begin slaughtering everyone in sight, forcing Daenerys into the center of the arena with Tyrion, Jorah, Daario, Missandei, and the rest of her unsullied bodyguards. They're almost beaten back and completely surrounded. However, at the last minute, Drogon shows up and flies into the arena, killing several Sons in his usual badass dragon fashion, biting them, throwing them everywhere like they're ragdolls, breathing fire on them, everything that you would expect from a badass dragon. However, not wanting to see her dragon hurt, Daenerys gets onto Drogon's back and flies out of the city, landing in the middle of the Dothraki Sea where she is surrounded by a massive Khalasar who take her captive. In response to this, Jorah and Daario head out to find her and bring her back, while Tyrion stays in the city to rule in her place alongside Missandei, Grey Worm, and Varys, who shows up right in the nick of time. Convenient, that is. So while all of this is happening in Meereen, there's another main character whose storyline takes place entirely in Essos this season, and that would be the little she-wolf herself, Arya Stark. After managing to board the Braavosi ship using Jaqen's coin, Arya finds herself in the free city of Braavos with no money and no idea what she's doing. She's taken by the ship captain to the House of Black and White, the headquarters of the Faceless Men, the group of assassins that Jaqen belongs to. She is at first turned away by the strange doorman, but is later rescued when she's cornered by some street rats by said doorman, who turns out to be Jaqen. She then begins to train in her elite art of being a Faceless Man, to become truly no one by sweeping floors, and later by cleaning the bodies of those who come and drink the poison well in the House of Black and White. Real cool assassin stuff going on here. This is another one of the parts of the show that the books did much better, because in addition, you've also got the introduction of yet another one of the show's most hated characters, the Waif, another assassin who helps to clean the bodies and takes an immediately dislike to Arya for no reason the minute that she comes to the house. Nevertheless, Arya manages to build herself up from lowly sweeper to actually being allowed to see the Hall of Faces, the place where the Faceless Men place all of their faces from the bodies that they clean. Arya is then given her first assignment, to watch a con man by posing as an oyster salesman and eventually kill him. Unfortunately, on the day that she's set to kill him, she sees someone that she never thought she would see again. Sir Meryn Trant, the Kingsguard member who killed her sword fighting teacher, Syrio Forel, and brutalized Sansa while she was under Joffrey's control. Sir Meryn is in Braavos accompanying Mace Tyrell, the newly promoted Master of Coin, to negotiate a new alliance with the Iron Bank. Having also made her list of people that she intends to kill, and knowing that she'll never get a better chance, Arya disguises herself using nothing but a terrible looking wig, and is selected by Sir Meryn, as he's a pedophile, as if we needed more reasons to hate this scumbag. She then reveals herself and goes completely apeshit on his ass, brutalizing them so badly we can't even recognize his face before she cuts his throat. However, she wasn't supposed to kill him because the Faceless Men never kill out of personal desire, and therefore Jaqen drinks a poison that causes her to become blind. Meanwhile, in the Eyrie, we check in with Littlefinger, the man who started this whole mess, and Sansa, his hostage, who thinks she's now his partner in crime. The two of them have brought Robin to the Royce's castle in the Vale in an attempt to make him into a knight after years of babying by his mother. After leaving him there in order to train, Littlefinger and Sansa head off in order to form new alliances with them against the Lannisters. While stopping at a tavern, they run into Brienne and Podrick Payne, and Brienne attempts to convince Sansa to come with her. Sansa refuses, however, since she believes that because Brienne wasn't there to protect her mother at the Red Wedding, she won't be able to protect her. Littlefinger's soldiers then attempt to apprehend the two of them, but Brienne manages to fight them off and kills them. And afterwards, she offers to train Podrick how to fight, and the two of them continue to pursue Sansa and Littlefinger. Which, as it turns out, is North, as Littlefinger was actually planning on wedding Sansa to Ramsay Bolton in order to forge an alliance between Winterfell and the Eyrie against the forces of King's Landing. This works both ways, as Roose Bolton needs some allies to back him up if either the North or the South rise up against him. Sansa refuses to do this at first, however Littlefinger manages to convince her because by getting close to the family that murdered hers, she would be in a great position to do some serious damage. After dropping her off, Littlefinger departs for King's Landing, having received a message from Cersei wherein he promises to give her Sansa's location. Meanwhile, Sansa and Ramsay begin to get to know each other, and while Ramsay seems charming at first, he soon reveals his savage side by flaunting Theon in front of her. Angry at this, Roose reveals that his wife is pregnant with his legitimate child, threatening Ramsay's claim to Winterfell. And on the night of their wedding, Ramsay proceeds to rape Sansa and force Theon to watch. All this time, Brienne and Podrick have been waiting in a tower outside of Winterfell for Sansa, and manage to get a message to her to light a candle in her bedroom window if she ever needs help. An old woman servant of Sansa's offers to help her with this after Sansa's new imprisonment, and Sansa attempts to get Theon to light the candle for her, but Theon instead tells Ramsay, who proceeds to skin the woman alive. Sansa later berates Theon for betraying her, saying that Theon deserved everything that Ramsay did to him, especially for killing her brothers, when Theon suddenly reveals that he didn't kill Bran and Rickon. Ramsay then departs from Winterfell suddenly to deal with Stannis' forces who are amassing outside the walls of Winterfell, and Sansa sees her chance to escape, but not before she's cornered by Miranda, the Kennelmaster's daughter and Ramsay's lover who is jealous of Sansa, as well as Theon, with Miranda holding a bow and arrow at her. But just as she's about to fire, Theon finally has a change of heart and pushes her over the railing to her death, before jumping off the walls of the castle with Sansa and escaping. And we end this season at the Wall with Jon. Everything seems to be hunky-dory at the Wall. The battle has just been won, the wildlings have been scattered to the wind with Mance's arrest, and Stannis has officially moved into the Wall. Wall. Unfortunately, Stannis still requires a large army in order to take the north and by default the Seven Kingdoms, and he attempts to recruit the wildlings by having Jon convince Mance to bow before him. Mance refuses to do so, however, telling Jon that he brought his people south to give them a peaceful life, not to fight in a stranger's war. His refusal causes his death, as Stannis has Melisandre burn him alive in front of all of the other wildling prisoners to send a message, but Jon defies Stannis by shooting Mance with an arrow, mercy killing him. Stannis then offers to legitimize Jon, removing his bastard heritage and allowing him to rally the forces of the north together for Stannis. Before this can happen, however, the election happens for Mormont's replacement as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and Jon is selected as the 998th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. His first command is executing Janos Slynt, something that's been coming to him for a long time after Slynt refuses to move into one of the other castles to occupy it, earning him Stannis' approval. Stannis' approval can't save Jon from the duties of being Lord Commander, however, as Jon easily makes the most disliked decision in all of the Night's Watch history. He frees Tormund Giantsbane and makes a pact with him to head north beyond the Wall to Hardhome and bring the rest of the wildlings south of the Wall, theorizing that if he doesn't, the White Walkers will slaughter them all and add their corpses to their already massive armies. This was already the reason for why Mance wanted them to go south of the Wall in the first place. Jon is heavily criticized by Alliser Thorne, whom he's made Chief Ranger despite their differences they've had in the past, while Stannis tells him to do what's right. Almost as soon as he leaves, however, Maester Aemon, the elderly blind old Maester of the Night's Watch, and secretly another Targaryen, as well as Sam's mentor, dies, and Sam is almost killed by other Night's Watch members who attempt to rape Gilly, but is saved by Ghost. At the same time, Jon departs to head north. Stannis heads south in order to wage war with the Boltons. Jon arrives north in Hardhome with Dolores, Ed, and Tormund, and manages to convince the rest of the wildling leaders to come with them south, agreeing to give them land to farm on rather than stay north and die. Just then, as they're all leaving, however, we see easily the most unexpected and fantastical battle sequence we've seen in all 5 seasons so far, simply for the fact that A, it wasn't actually shown in the books, only mentioned, and B, the fact that it's so unexpected makes it such a joy to watch. Just as Jon is getting the wildlings on the boats to head south, the White Walkers launch a massive attack on the Bay of Hardhome, sending wave after wave after wave of undead whites to slaughter as many wildlings as they can. Despite the best efforts of Jon's small band of Night's Watchmen and the wildling leaders, they're unable to stop the forces of the dead and are forced to make a hasty retreat, leaving behind a bag of dragon glass, and not before Jon manages to kill a White Walker with his Valyrian steel sword, Ice, showing that there are more weapons besides obsidian that can kill these things. After managing to retreat with Ed, Tormund, and the giant One-Weg Wundar, Jon sees the Night King, the leader of the White Walkers, walk out onto the deck, and with one raise of his hands, resurrect every single wildling that has just been killed, showing just how screwed the Night's Watch and by default all the human beings in the Seven Kingdoms are. Meanwhile, Stannis, who has been completely unsuccessful in terms of rallying any of the other northern houses behind him, is forced to take Winterfell with his own army. Unfortunately, this army ends up getting stuck in the snow, and Ramsay leads several men to raid his supplies, causing them to run low on food very quickly. After several of his men desert him, Stannis sends Sir Davos back to the Wall in an attempt to get some more supplies, although in reality it's for a much worse reason, in an attempt to appease the Lord of Light and get another, more additions to his army. Stannis allows Melisandre to take his only daughter, Shireen, his one and only daughter who has never done a bad thing in her life, who is the most sweet, innocent person you could ever meet, and burns her alive at the stake as a sacrifice. In the morning, Stannis discovers that despite the fact that the snows have subsided, half of his army has deserted him, and his wife Selyse has hanged herself from a tree. With absolutely nothing left to lose and knowing that he has zero chance of winning, Stannis marches with what's left of his force against Winterfell, and his armies are easily slaughtered by the Bolton forces. Stannis himself manages to survive the fight, but is badly injured, and he stumbles around and finds himself facing none other than Brienne, who witnessed the fight from the tower where she was watching Sansa, and who has had a hard-on for Stannis ever since Renly's death way back when. Knowing that his fate is sealed, Stannis tells Brienne to do her duty, and she proceeds to execute him off-screen. Back at the Wall, Jon arrives with the remaining wildling forces, and much to Sir Alliser and a lot of the other rangers' disdain, he follows through and opens the gate, and lets the wildling forces through. Sam then convinces Jon to let him head south with Gilly so that Sam can become a maester in order to replace the now-deceased Maester Aemon. Sam also wants to keep Gilly safe from the other members of the Watch, as well as hoping that Old Town, the city in the south that contains the citadel where maesters are trained, will contain some more knowledge about how to defeat the White Walkers. After Sam's departure, Davos arrives back at the Wall and attempts to convince Jon to rally either the wildlings or the Night's Watch to ride south and assist Stannis, but the two of them see Melisandre ride through the gates. Afterwards, while pondering what to do, Jon receives word that his long-lost uncle Benjen has been sighted, but it's all a ruse, as Jon is tricked and stabbed multiple times by Sir Alliser and several other members of the Watch, including Ollie, his own squire, and is left to bleed to death in the snow. So that was Season 5, and I have to say, if not for the saving grace that was the Battle of Hardhome, this would be my least favorite season. The narrative overall seems to be a massive build-up to nothing, a majority of the characters make a lot of stupid decisions, and it's a season infamously known for ruining the Dorne storyline. Not that I remember that storyline being that beloved from the books, I just remember it being way better than in the show. Nevertheless, we still did get some particularly awesome moments. Obviously, knowing what comes next in Season 6 helps to elevate this material a little, not to mention that this season officially marked the final season based on George's books. Despite some of the storylines from A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons continuing into the next season, for the most part, the books were done. And I really have to give David and DB props to Hardhome because holy shit, not only was that an event that was completely original to the show, as it had really only been mentioned in the books, but I didn't see it coming, and these fucking zombies have been built up so much to the point that the way that these two were able to show just how much damage these things can actually do was truly spectacular. So that's it. That's my recap for Season 5. Be sure to tune in very soon for the final recap for Season 6 as we prepare to get into Season 7. I still haven't decided whether I'm going to do a week-to-week recap of the season because it is shorter, or whether I'm just going to recap it all at once. So why not? I'm going to let you guys decide. Let me know in the comments which one of those I should do. Make sure you also click that like button and that subscribe button, as well as to follow me on Twitter at Movie Nerd Reviews, and check out the website movienerdreviews.com. That is it. I will see you guys next time.